proudly announcing that all over the country they're having non-white days at the colleges and saying no whites allowed. And then groups are being encouraged to self-segregate into their own, quote, racial groups. This is the complete and total overthrow of what Martin Luther King wrote about and taught and what is basic Christian Western civilization. And they're using the openness of our society, the globalist are, to come in and create irrevocable division. It's amazing to have this unfolding in our own country and to see leftists spewing hatred. This is the Daily Mail. Ariana Grande overheard saying she hoped her fans would effing die. And she, of course, wants open borders and Islam and says she hates America. Ariana Grande, I hate Americans, I hate America, after appearing to lick on displayed donuts on television. This is the lady who had her concert bombed. That's my point. The leftist trendies call for more Islamists to come in. They blow up the gay nightclubs. They blow up the young girls. And it's the trendies calling for them to all be brought in. And the very trendies tell us how much they hate their fans and how much they hate America. That's why they're allied with Islam. So the left's embarrassed about their alliance with Islam. So what do? They turn it around and say that I blame the victims and say that they were asking for it. No, I said the liberal, trendy governments brought it in and that they're the ones that are responsible. Meanwhile, you've got the young punk from Libya living on welfare, no job. He was a soccer player wearing $500 sneakers, an $800 jacket, and expensive dress clothes. Before he slimes his way in, his dad's an admitted reported terrorist, and his brother, we now learn, was planning his own attacks. But that's okay because he's liberal and trendy. And taxpayers paid for him to go back and forth from Libya. That's what's so disgusting about it, is that I've looked at the welfare rolls in Germany and in England. Upwards of 75 to 80% of the people are on welfare. They don't even work. They just mill around all day, blowing people up and shooting people and rounding women up and raping them and everything else from these hellish places they come from. And again, his father was a terrorist in Libya. This is on the news. And he was being watched. The plot was known. Let me just get to this first, and then I'll get into all the other huge news. And it's so big. We were the first to tell you back during the election that the Homeland Security run by Obama was hacking the election, that they were using the CIA to try to manipulate things. They even admitted it in major publications of the Washington Post because they want to hide it in plain view and normalize it. You just type in, Congress legalizes CIA's use of propaganda domestically. And then, of course, Obama signs executive orders to federalize the election. And they signed other orders to, quote, counter patriot media and claim we're all Russians. But now it's in the New York Post how Team Obama tried to hack the election. That's all coming up. So everything they've accused Trump and the populist movement of doing is what they've done. Now, let's go ahead and get to the big, meaty story first off. Huge scale of terror threat revealed. UK home to 23,000 jihadists. The Times of London. 3,000 people from the total group judged to pose a threat. I was told by one of my colleagues, one of my fellow researchers, who is on the ground dealing with these threats, and I say one of my colleagues, because he also wears a journalist hat sometimes, that it would be England would be the next place to be hit, and that's where the jihadists actually were the most organized and ready to launch their attacks. And mainly because they wouldn't stay part of the EU. The EU had green-lighted, who's allied with Islam, publicly, to go ahead and start launching the attacks. Huge scale of threat revealed. UK home to 23,000 jihadists, about 3,000 people from the total group judged to pose a threat. Stories up on Infowars.com. Continuing, this is just today. Coptic Christian attacks. ISIS claims its soldiers opened fire on bus, killing 29 in Egypt. Just a few days ago, there was a big bombing killing Coptic Christians. And, of course, lots of fun as well on Easter, killing hundreds and hundreds. But it has nothing to do with Islam. Meanwhile, the State Department, The Hill reports, quietly lifts the limit on refugee admissions despite Trump ordering them to stop it. But the State Department has a mind of its own, like cancer, and is doing whatever it wants. The State Department quietly lifted its restriction this week on how many refugees are allowed to enter the U.S., despite efforts by the Trump administration to scale back refugee resettlements, the New York Times reported on Friday. Continuing, bin Laden's son steps into father's shoes as al-Qaeda attempts a comeback. Manchester bomber's younger brother was planning an attack on the UN special envoy to Libya. Daily Mail, isn't that just special? Death toll nears 100 on sixth day of violence in the Philippines as the Islamists have taken a whole island and a major city. And that leads us to this next story out of the London Telegraph. 7-7 Met police officer calls for internment of Islamic extremist. Takur Ghaffar, an assistant commissioner at Scotland Yard and the 7-7 bombings, has called for the internment of radical extremists. He's an Asian Manchurian who was the security coordinator on the 2012 Olympics, said Britain is facing an unprecedented threat. About 3,000 extremists are subjects of interest to MI5 and police, and about 500 plots are being monitored. 500 plots. Imagine if you were plotting to blow something up or kill somebody or go detonate a bomb and kill 22 little girls or whatever, and you're not even being arrested because you've been politically ordered to stand down because of political correctness. He goes on to say it's a clear and present danger. With an additional 400 jihadists having returned from Syria, he said the numbers were far too great for them to be monitored by the police and security services. That's right. They bring them back from Syria, where the Russians and the U.S. just kick their butts. They let them come back in. Sweden does. Germany does. They put them on welfare, give them new jobs, you name it. They show back up, and they let them in. And they promptly, get 3 or 4 welfare checks and go out and wear $500 tennis shoes. The time has come to set up special centers to detain these 3,000 extremists. He added, they should be held at what McGoffer described as community-based centers where they will be risk assessed and put through the program. These centers would be different from the internment camp set up during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Because it's Muslims, you got to treat them with kid gloves. Mr. Ghaffar said that they would have to be backed by Muslim leaders. He also urged imams to issue what he described as collective fatwa condemning terrorist attacks, but they won't do it. Now, let's talk about what's happening here. This is not like the Japanese internment camps or the ones that German Americans were put in, or even some Italian Americans that I think went way too far as part of the hysteria of World War II. Many of them third, fourth, fifth generation. But still, this is what happens in a war. You've got 3,000 jihadis conservatively with 500 plots, and they keep using the terror attacks to basically turn all of England, Scotland, and Ireland into giant FEMA camps, giant re-education camps. And so if you continue to let these people in and let them do this, it will make everybody in the UK lose their rights. What needs to be done is, these people are all so proud of their jihad, most of them haven't even been born in England. You need to take their public statements about how they want to overthrow the UK and kill everybody and then ship them out of the nation. The answer is deportation back to their hellholes. There's a reason Saudi Arabia won't take any Libyans or take any Syrians, and they've got giant emergency centers with 500,000 beds for their own citizens. They won't take one. There's a reason they won't take one Palestinian, because most of the Palestinians aren't Palestinians. They're just vagabonds that roam around the Middle East and who are always trying to overthrow things.